Thanks, everyone, for joining us on the Page One podcast. I'm your host, Luke Peters, CEO of Newer Appliances. And in this episode, you're going to learn from Fernando Cariello about coming to America, how companies that are new to America can understand the culture and succeed here. So this is going to be really an interesting episode about a topic we haven't talked about. Companies from Latin America or other areas of the world coming to the American market and how they can break in and succeed here. Before we get going, though, I've got a really important announcement. We are looking for vacation homeowners who want to join our cause. You can learn more about it at vetcation.org, where we're helping veterans get a vacation, get a vacation for their family. And we're looking for caring homeowners who can spare a week in August to really make this a vacation of a lifetime for some of these deserving families. If you're interested, again, please go to vetcation.org. This is something that I started up this year, but I've been doing it for 10 years at my own vacation house and, just got my arm twisted a little bit to take this nationwide. So we're looking for some support. It's going to be a great cause and change some lives. And please get involved if you can. If you know somebody with a vacation home, point them this direction and email me. Okay, great. So Fernando has lived an international career living in 5 countries. He's done business in Africa, India, Europe, and the Americas, working in engineering, mining, and defense. He has 29 years of international experience, 23 years in high tech, 16 years supporting IT companies to establish operations in the U.S. He's a partner with the incubator CuboStart under the Lean Startup concept and co-founder of Base Miami, an accelerator supporting technology companies to develop business globally using Miami as a platform. He's also a mentor and investor in technology-based companies with 15 current portfolio companies and 4 exits. Welcome to the Page One podcast, Fernando.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, why don't you describe, usually I ask folks to describe their business, but it looks like you're involved in a few different things. I guess we could talk about CuboStart or even the companies that you're involved with here. Why don't you describe kind of what you do for companies?
What you do is in a concept that we support companies from overseas that want to operate in the U.S. So everyone talks about startups are companies that in the U.S. and that investors and that they're raising, so they create a business model and they thrive in the US or they fail. That's what they do here. When I think of our best market fit in a way is companies from overseas that are successful over there, and they want to transfer this knowledge to the US and thrive here, but they need to bridge the gap. So what we do is we identify these opportunity companies that have a traction, that have approved technology, approved offer service, and they want to come overseas, and you help them understand how the West market works, what the intrinsicies and things like that. And that's our business model. And we hold hands with them. It's not something that you just talk about it, just mentorship. We actually work with them on a daily basis on who to talk, what to do. And we have a team of that comes together and perform basic tasks like administrative functions, when I do the accounting, and we don't need to take care of it. We embrace that and the incubator side, and we do on ourselves. It's not just recommending an accountant or an attorney or someone. We actually work with them on a daily basis.
Great. Okay, and it was funny. Like I was writing up the title of this one, and I call it "Coming to America." And I don't know if you know this, Fernando. This is actually a really funny American film from 1988 with Eddie Murphy and Arsenio Hall. It's like the first thing that came in my head when I wrote the title down. But this is definitely a unique story on the podcast. And why don't we start with a story around one of the companies that you helped? Why don't you tell us a story of a company that was, why don't we start this way? You could tell us the story of a company that was maybe successful before entering the U.S. market, but failed here and why they failed. And the reason I ask is because, this will tell us maybe how the market here is different and how companies might not know how to prepare, how to successfully roll out over here.
And just like the movie, The Coming to America, they are launching the Coming to America 2 next week, right?
I know.
They're a bit there. So
Yep.
The key word that I like to mention is the fail with the market fit. Usually, the U.S. is the biggest economy in the whole world. So everything happens here. It's so big that people don't understand that you can be on a niche market and still be really big. And I have an example, a company that we supported from Brazil, that they have a large plant there. They have like a 38 stores operation there that sell. It's a big box store, large operation that use SAP as their tech stack. So this company was very proud of this client that they have there. When they came to the US, they had a meeting with the client here that was the same kind of distributor stores based. And they present, so we have this company, we work with SAP, we integrate this, we do that. And the client look at things that, we are a small corporation, we don't use SAP, we are very small. Then the guy say, how small you are? We are a distributor operation, we have only 42 stores of our own running Microsoft stack, and we serve also 10,000 small retailers. So we are a very small company on the southeast area of the United States. So we can't afford SAP. You guys are too big for us. And when he said it's too big for us, that was the click happened. The moment of insight happened. They are not too big. There's the right company that to work with. Just the technology stack was different. And when I mentioned why this is a fail, is that they are marketing their best client that is about SAP, and in the US, clients of this size do not use the tech stack. They use another tech stack, and they could not bridge the gap. So they need to either go up in the ladder of the clients, looking for clients that use SAP as a tech stack. That's what they are good on, or they need to move on the technology side to serve this kind of company, the same size of company. They need to move sideways and to adopt another technology stack. So this is as a fail, not understanding how is your market and how the different technology, different adoptions, the different way of doing business in the US makes a fail, right? So for me, that's as a good example of the issue that they have here.
Yeah. That is really interesting. And then how about coming from the other direction? Tell us a story about one of the exits that worked. And it would be great to hear any details if you're able to share, how big that exit was, what's the reason the company did so well, maybe how long it took. That'd really be great to hear.
Okay. In 2003, we created an investment fund down in Brazil to invest in technology companies. That's what we do. And a company that we use mobile technology that we invest on. And this company, in just 5 years, got a lot of traction and start serving companies internationally. And the client asked you to open the companies in every country of Latin America. And we did the exact decision. And instead of opening a company as investors of this company, instead of opening a company in every country of Latin America, we opened their office in Miami, and like a sales office here, and start managing all non-Brazil contracts from the Miami office. With this, we maximize profits for the company. The valuation went higher. And 4 years later, another investment fund liked what we do. We did a merge with another mobile company in Brazil, so the company is like double its size, double the valuation. And just 2 years later, we had another investor company that bought us out completely. So we left the company in 2015. If I don't in 12 years, we make a company from zero to a $50 million operation. That was really good.
Wow, that's awesome. And what was the company? It was an IT company, or what service or product were they selling?
It was an IT company. So they developed a technology for manufacturers that want to manage sales, mobile sales.
Yeah, that's awesome. And now, speaking of that one, so that's pretty interesting. You guys kind of consolidated operations in Miami. How hard is it for international companies to set up business here in the U.S.? I mean, do we make it easy? Do we make it hard? How does it compare to, other Latin American or other countries that you've worked in?
It's not easy nor hard. It's different. And that's the key, to understand the difference that you have between the U.S. and other countries. People think that regulations-wise, the laws, Everyone complains about the laws in Argentina and in Brazil, and that's so hard. It's easy to do in Chile, not easy to do. And in the US, you don't have a single set of regulations. We have the federal and 50 more on top of it. So it's not easy nor hard. It's different. You understand that every state has a different mindset, a different set of regulation and rules that you need to follow. So what is important to understand that the US as a country is a very unique business behavior. You need to understand that and understand that Americans don't buy based on pricing. This is very ingrained in Latin American culture to be the lowest price always wins. That's not true for Americans. You buy based on value and risk assessment. It's not the lower price that wins the bid. It's the fair price based on the value received. So when the company understands that and bridge the gap on top of the West mindset and they understand that you need to conquer, you don't need to conquer all the contracts, but to understand that it's better to sell for a little more, for a higher price than to get all the bids for a lower price that makes your operation not feasible. And another thing that's different is that companies from overseas, I want to open offices in the U.S. It's not the U.S. They open an office in a location, in a geography, in a market. I'm not selling to the whole U.S. If I'm in Miami, I don't have a problem selling in Idaho, but it's a different mindset of the way of doing business that you have there. Idaho, just an example, we have companies that we support that are in 10, 15 different states selling there with local teams and working based on the rules. But the idea is that before running to conquer whole America, you need to walk first. And before you walk, you need to crawl first. So you need to select a niche market, grow on it. It's not, niche market doesn't need to be linked to a geography or the demographics or it. You need to understand what it means to your company. Being it, an example, I can be the manufacturer of just brakes for bicycles or brakes for every kind of two-wheel vehicles or brakes for every kind of four-wheel vehicles. These are different niche markets that you need to understand which one you're going to work with. And after that, you're going to grow on it. The difference in the US that there's depth in the market for any kind of business that you want to do. You just need to understand where is your niche market and work there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, I was actually doing some research. I have some friends actually who kind of sell a little bit more internationally. And I think, for a country like Brazil, for example, has like really high tariffs to sell into. In fact, I was talking to somebody in the surf industry and they had a hard time competing in Brazil. They're all over the world and Brazil's huge in surf. I'm not sure you knew that or not, but they got some like amazing surf stars. So the surf industry has really grown over there too, but the tariffs are really high. And then of course over here, we're dealing now with tariffs, with China and a lot of the import export and supply chain is getting hit by that. You're mostly in the technology side, but do you have any thoughts on tariffs and restrictions and how that hurts or helps business, or do you think it's actually kind of overblown? And if people understand, say, how to go into Brazil, it's not as hard as they're making it out to be. I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Brazil is very unique on the protection side, the regulations on that. The goal of the government that was created like in the 60s or 70s was to foster the local manufacturing and economy, and today is based on creating jobs. I think that you heard that before, like the razor therapy create jobs locally. It works and doesn't work like that, right? There is not a true and fair answer to that. In Brazil, there's the higher taxation for foreign companies is on the selling side. On the other hand, if you want to invest in Brazil and create a local plant and develop your product there, it becomes very competitive, and there are regulations, there are laws that it's easier to invest money in Brazil and to send dividends back to other countries than to actually sell to Brazil. So that depends on the scale of the business that you're doing. Maybe it's easier to create some kind of partnership or joint venture or just create an operation there, right? The example that I say is that, for instance, cell phones. Apple does not manufacture the iPhone in Brazil, but Samsung and other Android cell manufacturers have local plants. Now you will understand that why Brazil is 90% Android and a very small set of the population use Apple iPhones, because it's much more expensive. They need to pay the tariffs on that. With that, and I see that it's easier to do in Brazil. Yes, it's not easy. I cannot say it. I have a sense of that Brazil is not for amateurs. You need to understand that. And the US is not as, it looks easier when you said there's no tariff, it's easy to do, but we have red tapes here that are different from the red tapes that you find based on tariffs and regulations. There are more red tapes in the US based on industry compliance, like in the healthcare industry, the HIPAA, or the financial services PCIs, or even the ADA, the American Disabilities Act. They create several red tapes for foreign companies to sell here. People don't realize that, right? Only when you are working with that, they say, oh, by the way, you cannot sell it here because you're not in compliance to this set of regulations. It's not a tariff. It's not a punishable by money situation, but it's in a way you need to invest into being compliant for that. And this is what balances out the whole situation. In a way, the U.S. is much more open than any other country in the world. That's correct. But it's not fully open as people realize it. And going back to Brazil, it's you can do business, and if you're trying to sell locally, there is not. They just become expensive in comparison to whatever they have locally to buy, and that's the comparison that we have. So for you to be competitive in Brazil on pricing, you need to understand the regulations and how to offset that on investments in the country.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thanks for that explanation. And that's exactly what this guy that I talked to, I don't want to give away the exact industry, but it was in the surf industry, and he just said it's just too hard to compete with the brands that are already in there. But I can understand why the government's doing that, and they want to really create a manufacturing powerhouse. And so I get it, but it's really interesting to see both sides. And then of course the red tape we have over here. Why don't we shift to something else? I mean, look, Fernando, you're working with so many different companies and so many different industries. And so, if you were to start a business right now or advise, especially if you were to advise a young, professional just starting out in entrepreneurship, what type of business model or sector or category would you suggest? What do you like best right now?
Oh, that's a hard one. I've been dabbling in several industries, but one thing that I realized after so many years that first you need to have pleasure in what you're doing, and pleasure means that it's not that you'll be having fun all the time, but you don't complain every day going to work or work with the same thing every day. So that's one thing you have to have pleasure in. And the second thing is that you must do something that solves a specific pain for someone else, and that you think that what you're doing is better based on your experience or based on the experience of the people that you know. So that's what you create a market, right? And finally, and in a way, I'll look for something that people don't usually like to do. Why? Because if everyone likes to do it, it's easier, like your surf guy. It's easy to go to the beach, to be surfing. That's a fun thing. Everyone wants that. But if you do something that people don't like, there's more money on it than you have on something that people just have pleasure in doing it. So, an example, I like cooking. I like to. People say that I will be a chef one day. The food business is very attractive today, right? Food Network makes it the glamour of the chefs, and everyone wants to cook, and everyone wants to do that. But food business is not just the restaurants. It's not going to the kitchen and do a dish. The food business starts in a farm with cows and carrots and land, and you have distribution, and that's all for business. And the restaurant that's cooking it, and there's the not glamorous side of it, right? And one thing is people forget that after the restaurant, there is still food business. You need to clean this out. You need to go to the landfill. You need to treat the oil. You need to clean the kitchen. You need to do all the ugly work of it, right? And one thing that I would do a business, and something that I'm copying from a friend of mine, that he developed a technology to clean commercial kitchens. And I think you realize clean commercial kitchens. What is that? Right?
Well, actually, I used to work in a donut shop. So when we were kids, that was our family business, Fernando. So I actually know how to clean a kitchen. I used to have to do, when I was 12, 13 years old, I used to have to do the dishes in a commercial kitchen. So I did it the manual way. That's how we cleaned it.
Exactly. But think about on an automated magic way that I hired a company to clean your donut shop and just take use of the old oil and make it something else. And then this guy created a technology that not only clean the kitchens, make it up to code, and also use all the old oils and the things that are left over in the kitchen that you don't throw in the trash and make it useful. He charged the restaurants to collect the oil and they sell the oil, so it's double money. He's making more money on his food business that is to clean it and collect than the most restaurants that he works for.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a great business model.
Yeah, that is so interesting. It's so true also. I mean, some of those restaurants are on super thin margins, right? And here comes, the contractor to come in here and offer that service, and his margins are probably great. And like you said, people don't want to do that job, or they don't know how to do it, and he probably doesn't have a ton of competition. So yeah, that's a great example right there. When you work with these companies that you advise, are you writing business plans, or I'm just curious, like the ideation stage. You mentioned Lean Startup. Are you using any of those models, for putting together, initial plans?
Oh yes, we adopt the business model Canvas. This is an easy thing to work with. People just see it and understand. It's just a single sheet of paper. You look at that and it's there, right? And what I like in the Canvas is that we started in the middle with the value proposition. Right? You don't start with how much money I'm going to make. No, just understand what you're going to do. What's your value proposition? That's your start. That's your first hypothesis. And then you start, if you see the Canvas, you go to the right side of it and you start work on the right side of it. Then you come back to the left side of it. Then you go back to the value proposition, see, does this make sense? It's a checks and balance of the whole idea in the beginning, right? So that's, for me, it's easier to work. You don't need to have a PhD in anything in economics to create a Canvas. You just need to have common sense, basic calculations, and it guides you to understand what you're doing. So I would really recommend the Business Canvas. It's not the only tool around it. There are several other tools, but this one, I believe, that for people that are starting their business, it's a good starting point.
Agree. And I've got a couple books, but is there like a specific website or software tool you use for that business model Canvas?
Not really. We just use the template that we can also, I think it's businesscanvas.com, something like that. Just Google it and you're going to find it. We tried some software that write up the Canvas for you. And in a way, I'm a very basic person. I like to have the printed paper on my hands. I just write stuff down and put the notes on it and make it work. So I think it helps the brainstorming session. I'm doing this now online, so we share the file and start writing on top of it. So we have a shared folder that you use that, and that's it. But you don't need to have you don't need to start on a tool for that. Although I've seen, and I'm still a friend of mine that create a Canvas for innovation that helps that draw the thinking process of it. But you can start with just a piece of paper and make it work.
That's great advice. Thanks for that, Fernando, because we'll try to put that in the show notes so everybody can check that out. But it's an awesome tool. So listen, you've written about the 7 deadly sins when entering the U.S. market. Just zeroing in on the most deadly, like what is the biggest offender or most common problem that these international companies have when they come into this market?
The 7 deadly sins is the result of many years of failing and seeing what was the fails that people make, right? And I already mentioned what would be the first one is the market fit. Don't realize that if it's a market, they need to change the offer product. But if I want to select the second most important one, it's funding. It's lack of funding. People come to America without a dollar in the pocket, and I'm going to make it big here. It's not quite like that. Even think about a startup company that you start with zero money and you start borrowing money from friends and family and grow your business. How long does it take? It takes you 2 years, 3 years, 4 years to get something that you're sleeping in an attic someplace, that you are sharing an apartment. So this is the kind of sacrifice that you are working on to come to the US without money, trying to grow your business. What I've seen, though, is that most of the companies that want to come to US, they are not really startup companies. They are foreign owned. They have some traction. They have money. Their founders are already in a stage of life that they are going not to be prone to share a bed with someone else, like a true startup company does here. So that means that they doesn't fund the company enough, and they try to thrive. And without the money, you cannot hire the people to bridge the gap to the market, or cannot hire the people to help you do the right thing, to understand the process. And they fail because they did not invest in the process as, let's say, as an investor would do on a startup company. What I usually recommend is this process that your international expansion is a spin-off of your company, and you are the investor now. So you do your pitch to yourself. Would you invest in a startup company in the US that you will be the founder and you're going to be leading the process? If your answer yes, create your fund money and invest in yourself. If you say no to yourself, that's not a problem, but understand that no one else is going to say yes to you as well.
That's good advice.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's undercapitalized. I mean, they say that with pretty much every business. So I can just imagine if somebody comes here and they don't have the capital, and then maybe isn't even used to that startup lifestyle, like you mentioned. So that is good insight. Fernando, you've had a lot of experience. It was good getting your feedback and hearing your opinion on, if you're a young person, what business or what category would you go after? And you kind of gave your ideas there. I kind of want to hear overall business advice on this one. Like, what's the best piece of business advice that you've ever received?
It's all about people, right? To understand people, the needs, the desires, business will help. It happens with that. It's not that you don't do a business for the business itself. You're serving people on the other side. And the other side of the contract is a person. On your side of the contract, there's also persons with you. The people that you are forming together, your team, you need to respect them and understand them all the way. So if you don't care about your team will not care about you. If you don't care about your client, the client will not care about you. If you don't care your support and anybody else that's around you, your service you offer, it makes no sense at all. I'm going to be making things that people cannot use. They're going to be producing things that people don't like. I'm going to do things that just because I want to do it. To understand the people and how the mechanics of the people around you makes you thrive. So people is everything, right? It's not. There are very few businesses that I know that is not that there is not a person behind it and making a decision for you. Even governments, the government said that the government is the collective people that represent us. So, and I used to say that I'm very humanistic about it. Like everything that you see around the world is created because we are humans, right? So if a car has a car seat, it says because you have a back and you have legs to sit on it. If you have a tail, our car seat is going to have a hole in it for the tail to go through it, right? But you don't have tails. So to understand that how people behave, what we have, and who you are, make it easier to make a business to thrive. So I think the best advice that I received, that think about people, and people is the center of everything.
That's a great way to think about it and understand people. And I like that. I think sometimes people get too much into the tactics, and this is high level, and just understand what everybody's thinking and how you're impacting people. So I think it's great advice. How can listeners find more about you and learn about you and the companies you're involved with, Fernando?
Oh, perfect. We have a website that's very easy to get. It's base.miami. That's it. That you type base.miami, you reach our website. Have a ton of information about doing business in the US. We have a great blog. We also have a nice LinkedIn page. The Base Miami page has lots of information. We try to schedule things every day to make it fun to have it. We have some calls on that. And my personal page, just LinkedIn, you put Fernando Cariello. You're going to find me very easily. Cariello, Cariello. And you can just put that on LinkedIn. You can message me. I'm always there. That's my social network of choice.
Awesome. And that's base.miami. We'll have that in the show notes so everybody can see that. And really enjoyed speaking with you today, Fernando, and learning your story. And before we let everybody go, just want a quick reminder here that, listen, we need your help on this new vacation homeowner project where we're trying to connect you and your vacation homes with families, veteran families that need a simple vacation for their family. So if you're a vacation homeowner, please hop over to vetcation.org, and you can see how we're supporting these veterans with dream vacations. We're launching on Purple Heart Day in early August, so we've got a lot of work to do. Please email me or get connected with me if you want to join, or if you have a home, or if you know somebody else that has a home and you want to get me connected there. Really appreciate you joining the cause, vetcation.org. And hope everybody enjoyed the interview today. Truly appreciate your reviews on iTunes, and hope you join us for the next interview.